step up to red alert.
Sir, are you absolutely sure? It does mean changing the bulb.
Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple. This is a YouTube channel about board games where I give reviews, top 10s and my honest opinions, regardless of the consequences. We'll get on with the show in just a minute, but first a quick word from my sponsor. As a fellow gamer, you'll understand this is unacceptable. The solution? Head down to my new sponsor, Kiender.co.uk. Kiender stocks many of the hot new releases as well as some old hidden gems. Free delivery on orders over £30, further discounts on bulk purchases, and even 5% of your spending refunded back to you as points to be used for further discounts down the line. If you use the referral link in the description below and sign up for a new account, you'll get 5% discount on your first order over £60. So let's make gaps in your collection a thing of the past. Get down to Kiender and start saving today. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the video.
Get on with it.
Today I'm taking a look at Last Light from Roy Cannaday of Dice Tower fame, as most people will be aware, and from Grey Fox Games. Thank you to Kiender for the review copy. So, when it comes to space games, I've pretty much championed the same space game all the time. Empires of the Void 2. Easily my favourite proper thematic space game. Now, when it comes to the other titles, don't like Eclipse. It doesn't feel like a space game, it's balanced your checkbook in space with lots of fiddly components. Twilight Imperium has the feel of an epic 4X game, but I don't need to play this game for 6 to 8 hours to get that kind of feeling. I can do it in a much less time. And yeah, space games have that kind of issue, that in order to facilitate the true 4X experience, the space games typically have to take forever. They need a ton of setup, a ton of rules, a ton of everything to get going. Well, the idea of Last Light is that it's meant to condense all that down into essentially what is proposed as a 60-minute format that replicates all the 4X components, but allows you to do it a lot quicker and still give you the same kind of feel. Question is, does it succeed?
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
So in Last Light, you're trying to gain 20 light, which is basically victory points. Players will start at the corner of a board that is set up before the game starts, with a rotating couple of rings in the middle, a white star planet in the center, which is essentially a kind of like Mechatol Rex for Twilight Imperium, basically, and a bunch of other little planets that will dot the rest of the black and white landscape here. Players have ships of 3 different classes, and they will fly these ships around the map, frequently getting into combat with other players, but they are essentially trying to go to these various planets, find out what resource they produce, which is represented by these various little tokens here, build little extractors on them, which is just basically another way to produce more resources, but for the most part, you're trying to kind of gain control of various areas of the board while also zapping them from other players. Players will have an alien power at the start of the game, which gives you various abilities like, say, dancing on bar tops, for example.
Hello, my baby! Hello, my honey!
And you will frequently be able to pick up technology cards which come in 3 different guises. Ones that benefit your entire empire, ones that benefit a particular ship type, and ones that will boost a ship in various ways when you roll a symbol on the combat dice. So how's Last Light going to try to keep this game short? Well, it's going to use 6 action cards. Every player has 6 of them, they're exactly the same. You choose one at the start of your round and face down, and everybody reveals at the same time. 5 out of 6 of these cards can be done in the player's own time, so it all works simultaneously. But the refresh card is the only way that you get to draw these back to your hand, much like, say, in Mission Red Planet, for example, where you play your numbered cards and then at some point you've got to draw them back up. But the command card is a little bit more unique, where this is where you get to move around the board and potentially attack other players. This is done in turn order, so everything else in the round, like researching and trade and construct and stuff like that, happens kind of simultaneously in the player's own time, and then you all resolve the command stuff. As soon as that's done, rinse and repeat, keep going until somebody hits that 20 light.
Everybody got that?
Certainly, if you're going to simplify things, you need to make sure the rules are fairly straightforward as well. Thankfully, in this case, they are. Most of this rulebook is actually the various types of setup and the components themselves. When it actually gets to the main crux of how you actually play the game, there really isn't that many pages you have to sift through, and one of those pages is the 2-player variant rules. So this one won't take you a long time to learn. It also won't take a long time to teach other players. It does a good job of keeping itself relatively simplistic, certainly a lot more simpler than, well, even something like Empires or any other space game, frankly, that you've played. It's definitely one of the simplest ones I've come across. The rulebook itself is reasonably decent as well. I mean, it's not exactly a looker, but it's got enough pictorial examples so I can see what's what, although I might have maybe liked a few more examples in certain areas. There's certainly a decent amount in here when it comes to like the technologies and some of the action cards, but I was a bit disappointed that when it gets to the main card that involves a lot of rules, which is the command card, this book is basically devoid of rule examples. I mean, there's nothing in there. There's nothing. There's some icon explanation, but there's nothing to show a combat example or a movement example or anything. It's just a wall of text. So as much as I can give credit that it's a simple rule set, I do have to strike some points of it though on the basis that we could have used just some more examples. In fact, the biggest pictures in this game are the setup diagrams. That's it. The rest of it is mostly just text.
How hard can it be?
The technologies are definitely the highlight of the game for me. Any game where you get to level up technologies, I always like. And in every space game, getting new technologies is cool. There is some rinse repeat in here, but I do like the fact that you've got the different types. Some that benefit your empire, some that benefit just one ship, or some that are based on combat roles. And so you can kind of gear yourself up in a lot of different ways using these, even though there is some rinse repeat in there. I would have liked maybe the balance to be addressed in some of these though. There are definitely some texts in here that seem a little bit better than others.
What?
There's a power in here called supersonic that adds to your speed. Normally you only move one speed and it takes a bit of time to get across the map. Well, if you have double that speed, you get to the middle a lot quicker, which means you can get all the exploration bonuses off these planets a lot quicker, and just having more speed is kind of just king in this game. It really makes a huge difference. So somebody who's lucky enough to draw that card early from this deck, always, in every game I've seen it, has a significant advantage compared to the rest, almost to the point where I don't want the technology in the game, but can I remove it? Is it simple enough to house rule that? I don't know. But that blemish aside, the technologies are generally pretty cool. It's just, it is kind of annoying. I don't know really what to do with that particular tech. And it's not just me that's fought this. You go on BGG and read some of the reviews in there. This technology is mentioned in there as well. Speed and getting to the middle early in the game is a big advantage.
They must have hyperjets on that thing. And what do we got on this thing? A Cuisinart?
The game certainly gets players interactive from the get-go. Like, you are really getting in each other's faces on a regular basis. You've got your ships flying around all over the place, and I like the way that the board rotates. So, you know, you can't have an opportunity to turtle in this game as much as I do like turtling when it comes to some of these Civ games. I like to, you know, I play Voidfall and I can't be bothered to deal with all the orange void stuff or whatever. I'm just like, I'll just sit on my home sectors, build up my defenses, have this economic powerhouse, and I'll win the game that way. But in here, you can't really do that because, yes, your home sector is probably relatively safe because it takes ages for people to get to there. But once you start heading into the middle, all bets are off. Because not only do you really have to get in each other's throats because of the whole deal with taking over planets and getting the resources from them, but because these rings rotate as the game goes on, you can't just sit in an area and think, oh, I'm nice and safe over here, nobody can get me, hee hee hee, hee 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 hee, uh-oh. It's very much like that. So you've got to be comfortable with that though. This is not a game where you're going to play a quiet Civ game. This is not a game where you're going to have like a chance to just, I'm just going to do my own thing, this is nice over here. No, you will be in each other's face and you better be good with that.
I claim this planet in the name of Mars. Isn't that lovely?
Component quality is a little bit on the weak side. This is the retail copy of the game, and I am so glad that I didn't fork out money for a deluxe version of this game, because I'm not entirely certain I would call that worth your money. This is a game that deals with 2 to 4 players, so there's no solo mode in here, and costs in the region of £50 to £60, possibly even more than that. I'll put it on the screen, but it's not a cheap game. It's a fairly large box, and there's game trays in here, but the game trays are a little bit odd. These game trays were clearly designed, I think, with some extras from the Kickstarter in mind. I mean, you've got a dice bit in here where the dice can literally slide out of the insert if you hold it up at an angle, which is kind of odd. You've got barely enough space to fit some of the other, like, you know, pieces like these bases. But also, I swear these inserts here were designed for player trays, which you could only get, I think, as an add-on on the Kickstarter. So if you don't have those, it's just basically a bunch of empty space. This game also expects you to buy all the rest of the stuff later, because there's more than enough space in the box to hold everything in here, and then some, particularly with regards to this tray. This tray gives you enough planets to play the 2 to 4 player thing, right? I've only taken 2 planets out of this tray, That's how many are left. Not a lot. All of this is basically empty space. The idea being that you're supposed to eventually get the 5 to 8 player expansion with other planets and use that trade to store them. I really wish publishers would get out of this thing where they try to make the base set box so big that it can hold future content. Why is it so hard for you to just make a box that is big enough to hold what there is there, and then when you release expansion content in the future, you release a bigger box? Not as a separate £80 nonsense deal, just a bigger box. You could cut this box, say, in half, release a nice small starter set, shall we say, and then when you release the expansion to say, right, we can go to 5 to 8 players now and there's more planets and stuff, you release it in a box like this where it has the space to deal with it, and then we can just chuck away the base box and have the new one. Why is that such an alien concept to publishers? I don't see why it wouldn't work that well.
It's stupid! It's stupid!
But even at that aside, the components in here are a little bit on the cheap side. Really, the best component in here is probably these custom dice, which are, there are later etched and they are, pretty cool. They are pretty cool custom dice. And possibly these marble planets, but the only problem is that you're not really concerned with these color planets, you're more concerned with the base. And there are some of these planets where, at a distance, particularly in bad light, it's a bit difficult to actually tell what colors are on the wretched planet. So you're really just staring at these bases, and these marbles just kind of, get wasted. The rest of it is just cardboard tokens, a few cards, 1 player power, and not much in the way of anything that really pops on the table, particularly the map. The map is literally this. It is just, this color is provided by other stuff. Here you go. This is basically the board. It's just a straight black board with some line etchings on it.
And the thing about space, the colour of space, your basic space colour, is it's black.
I get that it's trying to keep it simple, not too busy, but maybe I'm slightly spoiled, but when you've got stuff like this, with the boards on how that one looks, looking at this and knowing that I spent £50 to £60 on the game is a little bit on the tight side. I really don't get where that money's gone to here.
Where's my money?
Now when it comes to player powers, when you get them in the game, you want to feel truly unique to other players. Here the alien powers just feel a little bit tame. There's a good variety of them, I'll give it credit for that, but some of them just feel very mediocre. I mean, if one or more of your ships harvest light from the center star, gain an extra light. That's it. I mean, great. It means I need to get to the middle, although try staying in the middle for any decent length of time. It's harder than it looks. But yeah, these ones don't really get me that excited. And definitely some of these powers have proved more useful than others. There are powers in here which, especially if you look on BGG and read some of the comments I've seen on there, these powers are, they range from incredibly situational to incredibly powerful and consistent. And certainly anybody who's had some of those consistent powers where they're always useful tend to do better than some of these other ones where once in a blue moon you might trigger it and it doesn't even feel that great. So, I almost feel like you just shouldn't bother with these player powers. They're so tame and yet so kind of wide-ranging in their power level that they're almost a bit of a detriment to the game. But then if you take this out, you're kind of losing what little soul the game has. And what do I mean by soul? Well, it's this whole thing of trying to distill everything down to a smaller game. The reason a lot of these space epics work is because they are epic. They feel epic. There's a lot of rules in them, yes, but they grant you like a big experience. I might harp on some of the ones like Twilight Imperium for being way too long for what it is, but it is an epic feeling game when you're all done with it. And certainly some other games like Empires of the Void and other ones have done pretty well at giving a good 4X experience and really feeling like a space game. Not necessarily like a Euro game that utilizes a space theme, I mean Eclipse and Voidfall and stuff like that, but one that's truly thematic and truly engaging throughout. This one, because it tries to distill everything down to a penny, it loses a lot of the cool stuff that makes each of those X's fun. Like, this claims to be a 4X game. It's not. Exploration does not constitute going to a planet and flipping a token to see what it produces. That is not exploration in my book, people, okay? And I get that exploration is hard to replicate in a board game, but seriously, that is not exploration. If that's exploration, then by God, we are setting a low benchmark on that one. So really, you've only got the other 3. The combat is decent enough, but it's basically just a dice chucker game, so it's nice and simple. Although the weird rule decision in this, which I don't quite get, is that if you don't play the command card, you don't defend. ships do not auto-defend in this game. So if somebody plays the command card and moves to your area, you're basically screwed.
Hey, Imperial Fleet! Get ready to suck some dack!
I'm not sure how I feel about that. I mean, yes, you might have a one-sided fight where somebody who's technologically more advanced comes near you, but, you know, the Enterprise did not just sit there and wait while Borg Cube came by and zapped them out of the sky. They still defended themselves. That oversimplification just kind of feels a little bit weird from a thematic standpoint. The whole technology research, yeah, cool. You do get some technologies and level those up, and that's probably the best X of the lot here. But then what's the other one? Expand. Even Expand is fairly mediocre. You basically go across the board, try to hang on to a planet. You can build an extractor on a planet to make it produce a little bit more, and that's kind of it, really. And, you know, how long can you even hold on to those planets because everybody is constantly changing control of the areas? I mean, this is not a game you can really strategize. You kind of just have to see what the round looks like and what the table looks like. Suddenly somebody's right in your face and it's like, oh, I wasn't hoping for that. Suddenly you've got a nice clear route to the center star. Oh, well, I'll go for that. And, you know, there's no real sense of, like, long-term planning. It's just everybody go at each other's throats until eventually somebody gets to 20 victory points. Eventually.
Short answer yes with an if, long answer no with a but.
Yes, eventually is a bit of a strong word. On BGG, this box claims something like 45 to 90 minutes or so, 45 to 75 minutes. Sometimes it does that. Sometimes it really doesn't do that. This game has a variable endgame timer because it's the first person to get to 20 light. How long it takes somebody to get to 20 light, though, is entirely dependent on how the game goes. And you might have a game that takes about 45 minutes because somebody has one of the broken powers with some easy technology at the start and just skyrockets to the end. But then you can also have a game where everybody is at each other's throats to such an extent that the game just drags on and on and on because people can't get to the 20 victory points. But if you think this game is going to constantly finish in 45 minutes, good luck with that. Most of the time it seems to be on the 90-minute front, at least. Every time I've seen this played at my, like, Portsmouth Gaming Club, it's always taken at least 90 minutes, if not longer. I've had games where I've like, okay, they're playing Last Light over there, we're going to play this relatively longish game over here, okay, fine. Right, we finished that one, what do we want to play next? And I look over at Last Light and they're not even halfway done. Super fast 4X? I'm not entirely sure on that front. And it's not like they're taking breaks or, you know, getting distracted. This is just a normal, like, 4-player game, and it's like, okay, what? So, if you think that this is going to constantly be, like, your big substantial filler game, it's not always going to be.
When will then be now? Soon.
Player scaling is also a slight issue. I mean, there is no solo mode for this game. You can, I think, get the rules on BGG. It was in development and then they took it out because they couldn't make it work. Fine. If it doesn't work, don't put it in the box. Not everything needs a solo mode, but it's not here. The 3 to 4 player version of the game is like the main experience, but 4 player is probably the way you want to do it because 3 just feels a little bit too open. 2 player in particular feels quite open, but it's a variant. You essentially have a non-player faction that adds ships as time goes on, but whoever has the least amount of victory points gets to control that faction as you go through. That in itself is pretty cool. I do like how you can sort of tailor your victory point game to see whether I should take control of this non-player faction, but even so, with only 2 of you going against each other, you do lose a bit of that interactive experience that you would have if you just played this with 4 players. Now, I see people playing this with the expansion now and again, and they have big 5 to 8 player games, but the problem with playing this with 5 to 8 players is that the whole idea of this being a short, filler-esque, you know, space 4X game goes completely out of the window, because if you thought the time length of the 4-player games could take a while, oh my god, the 5 to 8 can go to insane levels, particularly 7 or 8. And even then, you've spent £110, something like that, on the game in order to play this with 8 players? Are you sure that's bang for your buck? Because I ain't sure with that one.
Shut up and take my money!
Last Light tries to do something different, which I gotta give it, you know, some props for. It's trying to boil down what is normally a long, epic sci-fi experience into a shorter play time that is simpler for players to get into. In that respect, it kind of succeeds. I mean, yeah, the 4Xs are a little bit dulled down to a point, but it is quicker than most of those other games out there. It certainly is simpler to get into than some of those games out there. But in doing so, it loses a little bit of the soul, like some of that passion that you get from those games. You're not going to supplant something like Empires of the Void 2 for me. I mean, in 2 hours, 2.5 absolute tops, I can get a really cool space 3.5x game experience from that. And as much as this game will probably take half the time on average than Empires of the Void 2, I'm still going to rather pull that one out. With this one, the game kind of boils down to the same stuff all the time. You start off, everybody migrates to the center, giant cluster battles, and then you just rinse and repeat until somebody gets to 20 light, which is kind of how Twilight Imperium works, really, to that extent. The components in here, Grey Fox is not known for their component quality, you know, in the past, and other than some slightly cool looking planets, most of the components in here are pretty basic, you know, basic cardboard, basic cardboard components, and I don't like the idea that you've got all these massive trays full of empty space kind of guilt tripping you into buying all the new stuff. You know, the expansion for this costs almost as much as this does. It's like more than a typical full game to buy the expansion to this, just so that you can play it with 5 to 8 players and have a few more alien powers. I'm sorry, I mean, the game has a variable endgame timer already. I do not want to play this with 8 players. This game is never going to finish in 45 minutes with 8 players. At that point, you've kind of gone against your original intent of keeping this nice and short for a sci-fi epic. But I'm not here to review the expansion. So with this one, I found myself liking it okay, but just not really getting that invested in it. You know, the alien powers, I'm a little bit like hoo-ha on their balance. The supersonic power, that has come up and screwed things up a bit. You know, some of these powers are certainly better than others, so are these techs. And so, you know, when it all comes down to it, I'm mainly just moving around the board, throwing a lot of dice, and just playing a big battle game with dice, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I just feel that there's other ones that do it a little bit quicker and certainly a lot cheaper than this one. You know, I'm still paying 50 to 60 pound at least for this game, and components wise and kind of, you know, like epic feeling wise, I'm not getting that price point. I don't think the value is quite here. So it's fine, it's okay, but it hasn't really sold itself to me. Last Light for me gets a 5 out of 10. It's average. It's fine. I'd play it every now and again. I wouldn't say, you know, I wouldn't absolutely deny to play it. It's certainly not going to be a keeper, but if people want to play it and I happen to be there, it's like, yeah, you know what, fine, I'll play it once in a blue moon. But, you know, no pun intended. But, yeah, as the big sort of replacement for a lot of those big epic space games, or like the alternative to them, I would still probably just rather pull out my Empires of the Void and have fun with that, you know. And, you know, that one has an element of Euro-iness and a bit more, and a little bit of Amerifrashiness. This one is essentially full-on Amerifrashiness, but in trying to, you're trying to like condense it down so much that you lose all the flavor of what makes those epic games do. And I think once you take out that flavor, you're left with something relatively bland, but not a bad game by sure. And I certainly give props that this was even attempted, because frankly this was a pretty tricky thing to do in the first place, to try and condense something like that down to a T. But yeah, it just didn't really fit with me.
You cut me deep, Shrek. You cut me real deep just now.
So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the page. Be sure to share the video out on social media, on Facebook or so, and just, you know, let me know your thoughts in the comments about, do you love this game? Do you hate this game? Do you want the expansion? Is it a must-buy? Is it much better when you play it with 5 to 8 players? Would you miss a solo mode? That kind of thing. It'll be good to get a lot of different viewpoints. Until next time, remember, regardless if you've got the hankering to play some marbles again, it's still only a game. So take care, and bye for now.